This is the stratosphere. It's one of the most beautiful places on our planet. You can see the darkness of space. You can see the atmosphere. You know, it's a very thin atmosphere. It's layered. It's gorgeous. You can see the Earth below. This was taken from the International Space Station. But growing up in Orlando, Florida, son of an aerospace engineer, this picture just captivated me and continues to captivate me. And when I was like 55 years old, I still dreamed of this view. And the problem with getting up there and seeing what it's like is it's very expensive and it's very difficult to do. Most people make use of a capsule to get up there, rockets, things like that, all very difficult technology. But I had a different idea of getting up there that wasn't related to these complex capsules that have been done in the past. And the analogy is scuba diving. In scuba diving, you have essentially everything you need on you. So you've got the oxygen that you need, you've got a wetsuit. So what would the scuba diving analogy be for the stratosphere? What would you have to build to allow you to go up in the stratosphere? And if you could get that, then you could use it for any vehicle. Like, if you wanted to do a balloon ride, you could do it. If you wanted to do a skydive, you could do it. If you wanted to do a sailplane up in the stratosphere, you could do it. So by separating out the environmental thing of you from the aircraft, it gave you lots of options on how to get up into the stratosphere and spend time there. And the idea was, what would it be like to explore the stratosphere in the same way that you explore, the water, using a scuba diving outfit. Now, there's one complication in this whole Alan going up and exploring the stratosphere, and that's my lovely family here. Now, they're not as excited about me going into the stratosphere as I am. Okay, I don't really understand it, but they're not as excited. And the way it comes out to is I look at everything from a technical point of view, right? So, here are all the redundancies and the double redundancies, and here's all the failure modes and how we check them off. Here's this history of every previous attempt that's ever been made to get up in the stratosphere and skydive down, and we have check marks by all of them on what we've done. My wife, on the other hand, says, how many people have done this before? Well, scuba diving in the stratosphere is kind of a new thing. No one's ever done it before. It's a world record. No one's done it before. And then the second thing is how many people have died or been injured attempting it in the past. And unfortunately, that's not zero. So we had two different ways of looking at the problem, and they came to radically different conclusions. So we ended up compromising in a way that was kind of funny. My wife came up with like 12 things I had to do before I was allowed to go into the stratosphere. Some of them were easy, like, here's a living will, right? Or, advanced directives, things like that. Things that you'd kind of see. Get your finances in order, things like that. Make sure the life insurance has been paid off. Although, the chance of the life insurance actually working on this, I don't know. But is there a specific exclusion in your life insurance policy on stratospheric skydives? I don't know. But anyway, then they got, a little more specific. Like, I don't want to call anybody. I don't want to clean up the mess that you've just made. So I had to have call trees set up on who would call everybody. I had to have my friend Patrick Pichette. He was in charge of everything. So if anything happened, I had written him a very big check that he was hoping that he would not cash, for all the stuff. And then I had to write my own obituary. It was short, very sweet. And then the last thing she made me do was to do a video for each of my children individually on why this was so important that I was willing to risk my life doing it. But I'm an engineer. I just checked through all of those things. You want a video? Yes, yes. And I got through the end because I really did think that the team had built an incredibly safe system. And I really believed that it was incredibly safe. And I had a lot of faith in the technology that we had built. So with that, here's what scuba diving from the stratosphere looks like. You need a suit. In this case, it was from ILC Dover. They made all the Apollo suits, all the extra vehicle activity suits, the best company in the world for spacesuits. On the back, there's a parachute, actually two parachutes, a main and a reserve parachute, going on the redundancy theme. And those are made by United Parachute Technologies. If you've ever done a tandem skydive, chances are you use their equipment. And then on the front, the general contractor and the people that did the whole front environmental system was done by Paragon Space Development Corporation. And that's 2 oxygen tanks, heating system because it gets very cold on the way up, and telemetry, radios, all that kind of stuff is on that whole front chest pack. So that's the system. Now, I'm just going to run through the problems because I know you guys are all tech people. And here are the things that you have to worry about. And the first thing you have to worry about is CO2. CO2 is poisonous, even in small concentrations. Moisture, which can fog up your faceplate and then cause icing and things like that. Very bad for you. So most people try to solve that problem. They solve the CO2 washout by using a lot of oxygen, and just washing out that CO2 and making sure you can't breathe it twice. You breathe it in once, the CO2 comes out, and make sure it's away from you. And they solve the fogging problem with a heated face shield. Okay, but a heated face shield, this is a plastic mask with a heated element that has to deal with both very hot and temperatures on the ground and very cold up top. So if you maximum heating on the ground, it actually burns away your faceplate. But there's a simpler solution, a really easy solution, and that's this thing right here, which is an oxygen mask. And it's kind of silly because I'm in a 100% oxygen environment, right? Everything in that bubble is oxygen. So why do I have an oxygen mask? And the trick is, it's not an oxygen mask. There's a little valve that lets in oxygen, but what it really does is every time I exhale, it sends all my exhale to the lower half of the suit. So now all the CO2 is in the lower half of the suit and all the moisture is in the lower half of the suit. So now I never have to worry about all the problems that have plagued a lot of attempts. And if you look underneath my chin, there's a big black plastic thing. It's kind of like the world's tightest necktie. It goes around your neck. And what it does is keep the things in the lower half of the suit from going into the upper half of the suit. So in one trivial way, we covered probably 40% of all the problems on the previous attempts, including if you saw Red Bull. He had fogging on his mask and was scaring Felix to death on the way up. And so we solved that way. Next thing you have to worry about is temperature. It gets super cold, like minus 125 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. So how do you test for that? So we actually bought this walk-in freezer. And then if you look over on the right, you'll see the big tank there. That's a liquid nitrogen tank. And with that combination, you can test pretty much any temperature profile you want. So this is what it looks like on the inside. You have a big knob, and they just turn it, and they look at sensors inside, and they try to figure out what the profile is that I'm likely to do. This was a system we terribly over-designed. It turned out that once you get above 80,000 feet or so, even the temperature is really low, the fact that the pressure is really, there's very few molecules up there, means that even though they're moving really slowly, they don't interact with you that much. So from 80,000 feet to 135,000 feet, I turned off my heaters. I was perfectly comfortable. But in this, I was not comfortable. This is super freezing. Matter of fact, it was so cold in here that the rivets on the bottom started popping out. So I was kind of under attack from below with popping rivets. But anyway, so we got through the temperature problems. The next thing, anybody see the Red Bull attempt? Okay, so Felix had a problem, and this is a video of his attempt here. Release is really good. You see him starting to spin in a kind of a counterclockwise. He stops that, and he starts spinning to the clockwise direction, and unfortunately this one gets really bad. Almost unconscious, he was spinning so fast, and he was also inverted. So he's an inverted flat spin at over Mach 1, okay? And through superhuman ability and superhuman skydiving ability, he managed to right that and actually land. But in my specification to my team on what we were building, I have to be able to get an unconscious person to the ground safely. So superhuman skydiving ability is not on the list of things that we're counting on. And so as a result, we thought we'd use what's called a drogue. Drogue has been used before. It's a small parachute about this big. It's attached to you. You fall down with it, and it will definitely keep you from flipping over. It's got some other problems of making sure it doesn't wrap around your neck, but that's what it is. And in theory, that should solve the spin problem, or at least that's what we hoped. So what we did was we took a dummy, not this dummy, another dummy. We brought it all the way up to 90,000 feet, and we released it. And we saw it with this drogue, and we saw what would happen. And look up there at the RPM counter up there in the upper left. So here's the release. Looks pretty good. You see the orange drogue, you'll see it pop through at various places in here. And so far it looks good. You know, we're only a few seconds in and we're only at 2 RPM. But that revolutions per minute is going to get bad in a hurry. You can start to see the sun start zipping through here. Up to about 180 RPM here. So 180 RPM is really bad, okay? But what's even worse is once you take 180 RPM and you go from 90,000 up to 135,000, 180 RPM turns to 400 RPM. Okay, so all of a sudden we have a problem that we're not going to meet our specification of an unconscious person getting down to Earth safely. So we actually spent a year on that problem and a couple other bad problems that we had. But we invented a spin-resistant system, which I'll show you later. So once we got through all that problem, the next thing is how do you test this? And so the first way to test it is, you know, a bunch of ground tests, but eventually you have to see what this thing is going to be like in the air. And this is the final version, the final airplane test. It's out of the Skyvan, which is a beautiful airplane for this. And what you'll notice in this video is the unique use of rollerblades. Not exactly booster boards, although the booster board would have been fun in this particular one too. So here is the airplane test. That's me, that's the suit. And you'll see the exit here. So what I'm going to try to do in this is I'm going to try to turn in a 360-degree turn in one direction, and then I'm going to try to do a 360-degree turn in the other direction. These are safety divers here, and their purpose is if anything goes wrong, they're going to help me. And in previous jumps, they definitely helped me, but they didn't need to on this one. And you can see me kind of bobbling up and down a little bit here. That was a side effect of the spin-resistant system. But it's much better to bob up and down at 0.76 hertz than it is to spin at 400 RPM. There's the pull. My fun was over, but these guys' fun was not. Okay, so now we've gotten the airplane test. We've done 5 of those. They've all turned out very well. And so, well, the first one was really bad. That was where we learned a lot about spins and things like that, turns and things. But the 4 subsequent ones went really well. And so we ended up in a situation where now we're ready to go. So the next thing we have to do is actually get up to high altitudes. Airplanes aren't capable of going over maybe 50,000 feet. You know, the U-2 is 78,000 feet, and the SR-71 is 78,000 feet, and you don't want to open any doors on those at any of those altitudes. So the best way is actually the original way that people got in the air is a balloon. And so, you know, here's what it looks like to do a balloon. That truck in the background is a helium truck. And this is slightly faster than normal speed, but I'll slow it down in just a second. And typically, the helium is up in the top, and this long tail is the result of as you start going up, the pressure goes down around you, and the balloon's going to need to expand. And actually, that expansion's really good because it means that the balloon's going to go linearly up to altitude. It's going to climb at almost between 1,000 feet per minute and 1,200 feet per minute the entire way. But what's really interesting about balloons is they're very dangerous. You know, they can sail, the wind can come up, all these bad things can happen. And also, the other problem with balloons is you don't necessarily know how much lift they have. So in the Red Bull case, the balloon went up, they had this giant tractor, it went underneath with this giant capsule, they picked a moment, they dropped it, and hoped it went up. But what we have here is the balloon gets stood up. Since I weigh a lot less than a 3,200-pound capsule, we were allowed to use this very simple system where we stand the balloon up, we pull that out, this thing pulls away, and these 2 straps here actually have load meters on them. So they actually know exactly how much free lift that balloon has. So we can look at it from all directions, we can stare at it, we can make sure that it's going up. All the time I'm not attached to it. So if a huge wind comes up and takes this thing and destroys the balloon, I'm not on it. So the trick is, how do we get me on it for the shortest possible time between a launch? And so here you see me exiting stage right here, or entering stage right, and this little vehicle here they called the launch sedan. And so that pulls me in, and then I go right underneath it. They hook up one little electrical connection and one hard connection, and then I'm good. So the next question is, where am I going to land? And so what you do to do that is you do these weather models. The government provides one, but what we ended up doing is launching some weather balloons ourselves. And the idea is we will figure out what the wind is at every altitude. And on this day, we were launched from Roswell, New Mexico. And the reason Roswell is a wonderful place is for half the year, all the winds go to the east, and there's nothing there. No lakes, no trees, practically no houses. So anywhere the east works. And in this case, we went almost straight up, drifted a little bit to the south, and we hit stratospheric winds. Now, I thought the jet stream was where all the winds were, but it's not true. There's stratospheric winds that go up to 150 miles an hour. On this day, it was 110. And as soon as you hit them, we went beelining toward the east. But we, the day before, had flown a helicopter over this whole path. We knew every area in that thing, exactly what were the best areas. There's no bad areas, but there were some areas that were better than others. So with that, we're ready to go. So I'm going to take you to Roswell, New Mexico, and here we go through at Roswell. It's the middle of the night. You can see the tin shack there. It takes about an hour and a half to get me ready. I'm pre-breathing oxygen before they start putting the suit on.
Very nice.
This is on the trip out, and you can see me hanging in there. The stuff behind me is a train that's basically the consumables, so that I don't use my onboard oxygen on the way out there.
Okay, to confirm, you have clear from 15 miles.
That's Dave Jordan checking with the FAA. I have my own 10-mile corridor of airspace for the entire way up. There's a launch. There's me waving with my left hand. I started waving with my right hand, but here's the emergency release right here. My team banned me. Everything has to be with your left hand now. So this is the most beautiful 2-hour and 7-minute ride you've ever imagined. Think of it as Google Earth in reverse. You know, you start out with pebbles underneath you, and before you know it, you have whole states underneath you. See, the fields here are giant. They take up a lot of room and stuff like that. But wait till we get up top, and you can see those giant, like, wheels and stuff are going to be like little pebbles on the way up.
You are now passing through 131,000 feet.
So this is 131,000 feet I'm going through, which is that's the altitude that I have to go to beat the Red Bull record. Now you can really start to get an idea of what it looks like up here. This next picture, that's a lens effect. It's not quite that curved, but you can definitely see the curvature of the Earth. You can see the darkness of space. You can't see any stars. It's actually kind of interesting. This is what it looks like. This is my favorite shot. I mean, of what the darkness looks like, and a little patchy ground fog here. It was beautiful. Leg movements were acknowledgments, because actually working a radio requires too much energy. This is the countdown. 4, 3. I'm going to come back to this release in just a second, so you'll get another look at that. I'm going to do a slight backflip here and watch for the balloon to go by. That's the balloon, totally round at this point. There's the drogue. I'll tell you about that in a second again. Balloon goes by a second time. 31 seconds into it, I cross the speed of sound, Mach 1. 51 seconds, I get the fastest I ever get, 822 miles an hour, Mach 1.22. And we're going to fast forward through 4 minutes and 27 seconds here and just jump to the parachute opening.
We lost the data.
That's Mark Kelly, and one of the astronauts. His brother was the one that was up in the space station. And here's the opening. It's a wonderful moment when that parachute opened, let me tell you. We did something really cool where when I opened, my a friend in an airplane, the guy who did my parachute work, jumped out right next to me, and he opened. So I actually had a wingman on the way down.
Right now.
So this is the landing or crash, depending on how you want to describe it. Every landing was like that. None of them I felt a bit. I mean, you're in this very beautiful enclosed thing, you know, you're as protected as you'll ever see. So even though it looks bad, it was actually really nice. This hug right here, I later found out wasn't for me. It was because they got the balloon to come down. That's another story.
Tired but healthy.
Okay, so let's get past that. Okay, so the one moment that I want to talk about is this release, okay? Because it's a really important moment in the thing. And if I go back to Joe Kittinger, he did 3 jumps. The highest was 102,000 feet. But the first one of those was around 75,000 feet. And he was in a capsule, and this is one of the many dangers of the capsule. He tried to get out of his seat. And because of a thermal expansion coefficient on the seat, he actually couldn't get up. So he's stuck up there, and he's trying to get himself out. And meanwhile, he hits a timer on his, which is how long is the delay is going to be before the drogue parachute comes out. Because if it comes out too early, it could wrap around him. If it comes out too late, it's going to destroy itself because you're going too fast. So how do you get, and what happened to him is while he was moving around, he set off that timer, he got to the edge, he jumped off, timer went off too early at that point, the drogue parachute wrapped around his neck, he went into a spin, went unconscious, woke up under a parachute. Okay, so how do you stop that from happening? Now he was fine, and he went on to make 2 more jumps. But the secret really is, how do you get a drogue parachute out so fast, really fast, without it tangling? And the way the team came up with, and also where do you attach that drogue parachute? Because all of those things are critically important. So watch what happens here. There turns out there's a graphite roll underneath this thing, and the drogue is attached to it, and it's actually inside. So as I release, watch this graphite carbon fiber thing is going to come out, and it's going to form itself into a tube. And when it does, that tube is going to be as solid as any piece of solid PVC that you've ever seen. And because that tube's 10 feet long and the drogue is only 5 feet long, there's no way for that drogue to ever tangle with me. So that magic made it so I never worried about that drogue tangling with me at all, and solved the problem that Kittinger almost was killed by. So a very simple solution. And the other thing you'll notice is rather than the drogue attachment here, which is where most of them are, it was moved up to here. And that one change took the spin rate from 400 RPM down to 22 RPM. And it was also in a vertical orientation, which is a very easy way to spin. Humans spin very well there. So with that, here we go. Maybe. There it goes. Slow. This is slow-mo. See the drogue right there? See this thing come out? That's now a pipe. And that pipe is set up so it will not allow that drogue parachute to get near me. So that one thing solved a huge number of our potential problems. And that's why when you saw that drogue underneath me, uninflated, where that normally would have been a crisis, in this case it was a very easy, normal, straightforward thing. And when I was doing those backflips where I got a beautiful chance to see the balloon above me, I wasn't worried at all. So with that, I just want to talk about the team here. Amazing group of people that I got to work with. There were balloon people, incredible aeromedical staff that taught me a lot about how the body reacts to high altitudes and things. There were life support system people here. There were people that were experts in parachute technologies and things like that. This is everybody that was there at the last jump. The core team was probably about 15 or 20 people But they were amazing. And I think when I look back, records will get broken, but teams last forever. So thank you to this group of people. So with that, we have a few minutes for questions, I think. You okay with that?
Questions?
Go ahead.
How was it funded?
Me. I would have gone to Vinod, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to see the business plan. That's going to go with it. No, I funded it, and it's actually kind of important. I mean, in theory, I had actually gone to Larry Page, my boss at Google, and he said he would support it if I wanted it. But the problem with funding is the funder then gets to start making decisions. And in my case, when we had a bad test with a lot of things that went wrong, we actually wanted to step back and take a year to totally redesign. We redesigned pretty much every system. And I don't think I would have wanted to go cup in hand and say, hey, I desperately need a bunch more time and a bunch more money, pretty much not knowing how much that was going to cost. But given the stakes, I think it was better to be able to make those kind of decisions, which I did. So,
I have a question. So
Sure.
Back here. Was there a pressure differential, and did you have to do pressure breathing as you were going up or down?
No, the inside the suit was pressurized at 5.4 psi, which was the highest pressure suit that any American has ever jumped with. The pressure inside the suits for like the shuttle astronauts, when they're pressurized, they don't go up pressurized. But if they had pressurized them, it would have been at 4.3, which means my effective altitude was down to about 25,000 feet. And that's actually a good altitude. The risk of decompression sickness is very low in those altitudes. So the higher the pressure, the more mobility issues. So that's the trade-off you make. But no, it was no problem at all. At 5.4 psi, with breathing 100% oxygen, there's no issues with breathing. Normal breathing. It's like kind of like scuba diving, actually. Go ahead.
What is next?
Next, so there's three problems. When we did this, I said, I'm going to break every record that's out there. It's like there was a balloon record up, but to get the balloon record, you have to go all the way up and you have to go all the way down. So on the balloon. But that's no big deal. Just get a basket, hang it on the balloon. I even had a balloon. But there's three things that were a problem. The first one is my wife banned me from doing anything extremely dangerous ever again. So that was the first problem, and I didn't think this was extremely dangerous, but if you took a poll of this room or any room, my wife would win like every time. But then the second problem is as soon as I touched the ground, my team went off and formed a company called Worldview, and their idea was to take a capsule up there to 100,000 feet with a balloon, but have a fully inflated parafoil canopy there, so that when you release, you don't go at Mach 1.22. You actually just float down gently. So they've got a space tourism business based on that. And the third thing is I donated the suit to the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum. Hopefully it will be on display by the end of this year. So I wouldn't have a wife if I did it again. I don't have a suit and I don't have a team. But other than that, I'm ready to go. Go ahead.
Did you say you got the balloon back? So how?
Yeah, the balloon, in any kind of effort like this, what happens is there are some things that you think are going to be easy that turn out to be hard, and some things you think are going to be hard that turn out to be easy. Getting the balloon down was something I thought would be easy. It turns out to be really hard. Because at 135,000 feet, I'll just give you an example. There's a couple ways to get it down. One is you open this big vent, okay? Huge vent. It's like this big, and it opens like this big. It's giant. But inside that balloon is 11.6 million cubic feet of helium. And the differential in terms of pressure is pretty much zero between it. So in the end, we ended up using pyrotechnics to get it down. We actually had a big thing of det cord around the whole vent thing, and that was the thing that made the big difference. So you fired that, and even that's not enough. At that altitude, there's so little oxygen that det cord kind of assumes that you have some oxygen. It's got an oxidizer, but not enough. And also you have to reflect it down into the balloon rather than out. So we actually had two things of det cord. So anyway, but yeah, it was hard to get down. We were also a little worried about giant flaming balloons coming down. Probably not good for the FAA. Anyway, might have time for one more. 22 seconds here. Any other question?
I'm going to ask, what else did you consider?
doing?
Well, you know, the funny thing on this one is I actually had a friend who wanted to do this jump, and he asked me to evaluate the system that they were considering, and I really told him, hey, these big capsules are horrible. And so what really happened is his funding fell through. I proposed this solution to him, but he wasn't going to be able to do it, and so I got so attached to this problem I couldn't let it go. I thought it was the right way to do it. It was the safest way. It was the cheapest way, and I couldn't let it go. So it was a problem that got me, and then eventually it was the team that kept it going. So anyway, I never had another plan B.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.